I never wanted to return to Westbrook. 15 years away had dulled the sharp edges of my memories, but stepping back into my childhood home brought it all rushing back. The suffocating expectations, the constant comparisons, and my father's perpetual disappointment. Marcus Chen. My brother James's voice carried across the foyer as I set down my suitcase. He stood at the top of the grand staircase, every inch the successful heir in his tailored black suit. Didn't think you'd actually show. He was my father too, I replied simply. James descended with measured steps. Technically, yes, though you haven't acted like a son or a Chen in 15 years. I bit back a retort. I hadn't come to fight. How's Mom holding up? As well as can be expected when one son stands by the family while the other runs away to play with cameras. The contempt in James's voice was familiar. I'd heard it from my father often enough. Photography, my passion, my career, my escape, had always been dismissed as a hobby by my family. Chen Investments demanded generational loyalty. My father had built it from nothing, and James had embraced his role as the heir apparent while I'd chosen a different path. Still taking pretty pictures for magazines? James asked with a dismissive wave. Must be fulfilling, wasting your business degree on freelance work. Before I could respond, my mother appeared in the doorway to the sitting room. Age had silvered her hair, but Eleanor Chen still carried herself with the same regal posture I remembered. That's enough, James, she said quietly. Your father isn't even in the ground yet. She approached me, her expression unreadable. For a moment I thought she might embrace me, but she simply nodded. Marcus, you look well. Your room is as you left it. That evening, the house filled with my father's business associates and friends, people who'd watched me grow up, who'd attended my graduation, who'd witnessed my final explosive argument with my father before I left. Their whispers followed me through the rooms. There's the younger Chen boy. Abandoned the family business. Your father was so disappointed. Left it all to James, I heard. I retreated to the patio, nursing a scotch I didn't want, when Victor Zhao, my father's oldest friend and business partner, approached. Marcus, he said, settling beside me. It's been too long. Uncle Victor. The childhood name slipped out automatically. Your photographs. I've seen them. National Geographic Time, that series on disappearing coastal communities. Remarkable work. I looked at him in surprise. What? You think because I'm your father's age, I can't appreciate your art? He chuckled. William never understood it, but I do. Dad made his feelings clear, I said, rotating the glass in my hands. Chen men build legacies in business, not take pictures. Victor sighed. Your father was complicated. Brilliant with money, less so with words. Particularly with you. He had James, the perfect heir. Perfect, Victor echoed thoughtfully. An interesting word. Before he could elaborate, my mother appeared, summoning us inside. The lawyer is here to discuss some preliminary matters before tomorrow's service. In the study that had once been my father's sanctum, Mr. Winters, the family attorney for 30 years, sat behind the massive oak desk. James and my mother took the leather chairs opposite, while other family members and key business partners filled the remaining seats. I stood near the back, leaning against a bookshelf. While the formal reading will take place after the funeral, Mr. Winters began. William asked me to address certain matters tonight. He shuffled some papers. Primarily, he wanted the family to know that Chen Investments will continue under family control, with succession plans intact. James straightened in his chair, a satisfied smile playing at his lips. He also wanted to confirm that the annual company gala will proceed as scheduled next month as a celebration of the company's future. My mother nodded. William was very clear about that. The Chen Autumn Gala must continue regardless of circumstances. As the conversation turned to funeral arrangements, I slipped out unnoticed. In my old bedroom, everything remained eerily preserved. Debate trophies, business school textbooks, even the half-finished financial models I'd abandoned. Only my photographs were missing, removed, no doubt, to erase evidence of my betrayal. I opened my suitcase and removed a polished wooden box about the size of a thick hardcover book. My father had sent it to me a month ago, the first communication in 15 years, with a simple note. Keep this safe. Bring it when the time comes. I'd been shocked to receive it, even more confused by its contents. Inside lay an old brass key, yellowed documents, and a letter I hadn't been able to bring myself to read. Now, sitting on my childhood bed, I finally broke the seal. Marcus, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you've done as I asked by returning to Westbrook. I've never been good with words, a failing that cost me my relationship with you. Business made sense to me in ways people never did. I told myself your departure was betrayal, but with time, I've come to see it differently. You had courage I never possessed. The courage to pursue purpose over obligation. The enclosed documents explain everything. Don't share them until after the will reading. Trust no one except Victor until then. Your father, William Chen. I stared at the signature, the formal closing so characteristic of the man. Even in what amounted to an apology, he couldn't bring himself to sign it, "Love, Dad." The funeral the next day was exactly as my father would have wanted it, dignified, well-attended, a testament to his standing in the business community. I sat in the front row beside my mother, the wooden box on my lap. James gave the eulogy, speaking eloquently about legacy and family duty, pointedly noting how Chen Investments would continue stronger than ever under dedicated family leadership. At the reception afterward, I endured more whispers, more sidelong glances. There's the disappointment who abandoned the family empire. I overheard Lawrence Tang, one of my father's partners, murmur to another guest. When James approached me by the bar, his expression was triumphant. "I hope you're not expecting anything tomorrow," he said, voice low. "Dad cut you out completely. Mom and I made sure of it after your little disappearing act." I said nothing, just held the wooden box a little tighter. The next morning, family members and key executives gathered in the conference room at Chen Investments headquarters. Mr. Winters arranged his papers at the head of the table, with James seated to his right, already looking every bit the company president. "Before I begin," Mr. Winters said, "I should note that William made significant changes to his will 3 months ago." A ripple of surprise moved through the room. James frowned. "Changes? What changes?" "All in due time, Mr. Chen," the lawyer replied, then began the formal reading. The first sections were standard: personal effects to my mother, charitable donations, provisions for longtime staff. James grew increasingly impatient, drumming his fingers on the polished table. Then Mr. Winters reached the business holdings. Regarding Chen Investments, he read, "I hereby bequeath all Class B shares, representing 30% ownership, to my son James William Chen." James smiled, relaxing visibly. "Furthermore," Mr. Winters continued, "I hereby bequeath all Class A shares, representing 51% controlling interest in Chen Investments, to my son Marcus Alexander Chen." The room erupted. James shot to his feet, his face flushing crimson. "That's impossible. Marcus abandoned the company. He knows nothing about running it." My mother sat frozen, her composure finally cracking. Mr. Winters waited for the commotion to subside. "There are conditions to this bequest," he added, raising his voice slightly. "Marcus must serve as chairman for a minimum of 1 year before any shares can be sold or transferred. During this time, both brothers must attend all board meetings and key company functions, including the annual gala." James's face had gone from red to white. "This is a mistake. Dad would never." "Your father was of sound mind," Mr. Winters interrupted firmly. "He'd made these changes deliberately and explained his reasoning to me in detail." All eyes turned to me. I'd remained silent, the wooden box still in my lap. "Did you know about this?" James demanded. "No," I answered truthfully, "not about the shares." "Then what's in the box?" my mother asked, speaking for the first time. "You've been guarding it since you arrived." I placed the box on the conference table and opened it, removing the yellowed documents. "These are the original founding papers for Chen Investments," I explained, along with documentation of its first major acquisition, the Riverside properties. Victor Zhao nodded slowly from across the table. "The deal that made William rich." "Yes," I confirmed. "Except, according to these papers, Dad didn't make that deal alone. He had a partner who provided half the initial capital but chose to remain a silent partner, unmentioned in the company history." "What partner?" James coughed. "That's absurd." I continued as if he hadn't spoken. "That partner was Mai Lin, our grandmother, Dad's mother." My mother gasped softly. According to family lore, our grandmother had been a simple homemaker who died when my father was in college. These documents show that grandmother was actually a successful businesswoman in her own right. She funded Dad's start in real estate on the condition that the company would always prioritize certain values: community investment, ethical development, and family balance. I removed a faded photograph from the box. A young woman in 1960s business attire standing proudly in front of a small office. Grandmother believed success meant nothing without purpose and family harmony. Dad built the company on her investment but strayed from her values. James shook his head in disbelief. If any of this were true, why would Dad keep it secret all these years? Why tell you and not me? Because, Victor interjected quietly, Marcus reminds William of Mylin. Same independent spirit, same willingness to walk away from money for principle. He looked at me with newfound understanding. William realized it too late. This is ridiculous, James sputtered. Some convenient story about a grandmother none of us knew, some mysterious documents. The documents are authentic, Mr. Winters confirmed. I verified them myself, as has an independent examiner. I turned to James. Dad didn't choose me over you. He realized he'd made a mistake forcing us into competing for the same role. You're brilliant at operations and growth. That's why you received the Class B shares. Dad wanted us to balance each other. So I'm supposed to work for my younger brother now? James asked incredulously. The one who knows nothing about this business? Not for me. With me, I corrected. I bring a perspective you don't have, one that honors our grandmother's original vision. And I have no interest in running day-to-day operations. My mother had been examining the photograph closely. I never knew, she whispered. William never spoke of his mother this way. Dad was complicated. I echoed Victor's words from the night before. Brilliant with money. Less so with words, my mother finished, a sad smile touching her lips. In the chaos that followed, as James demanded further verification and board members whispered urgently among themselves, Victor made his way to my side. You've been taking pictures of struggling communities for years, he observed, documenting displacement from luxury developments, environmental impacts of unchecked growth. I nodded, surprised by his knowledge of my work. Not just pretty pictures after all, Victor said. Research. You've been studying exactly what happens when companies like Chen Investments prioritize profit over people. I didn't know I was researching the family business, I admitted. I was just following stories that seemed important. And now you're the controlling shareholder of a company whose practices you've criticized, Victor noted. What will you do with that power? It was the question I'd been asking myself since opening my father's letter. Honor my grandmother's vision, I said finally. Make Chen Investments something worth being proud of. The annual Chen Investments Gala took place exactly 1 month later, as my father had insisted. The ballroom of the Westbrook Grand Hotel glittered with the city's elite, all curious about the company's surprising succession plan. James and I stood together at the entrance, greeting guests, an uneasy truce between us after weeks of tense negotiations and revelations. He still resented my sudden elevation, but even he couldn't deny the authenticity of our grandmother's story once the evidence had been thoroughly examined. Quite the plot twist, he muttered between handshakes. Dad's final power move from beyond the grave. I think it was more than a power move, I replied. It was his attempt to fix what he broke, in the company and in our family. James snorted skeptically, but I caught something else in his expression. A flicker of consideration, perhaps even hope. When it came time for speeches, James took the podium first, outlining the company's impressive financial performance and growth projections. He was in his element, commanding and knowledgeable. Then it was my turn. A hush fell over the room as I approached the microphone. Many present still saw me as the prodigal son, the disappointment who'd abandoned the family empire only to return and claim its crown. Many of you know me as the Chen who left, I began. The photographer who chose art over business. What you don't know is why. I gestured to the large screen behind me, where a photograph appeared. One I'd taken years ago of an elderly couple being evicted from their home of 40 years to make way for a luxury development. A Chen Investments luxury development, though I hadn't known it at the time. I left because I couldn't reconcile the company's practices with my conscience. What I didn't understand then was that Chen Investments wasn't always this way. It began with a different vision, one established by Mei Lin Chen, my grandmother. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as more photographs appeared on screen. Grandmother's original business, documents of her investment, and finally, her handwritten business philosophy. Profit without purpose is empty. Growth without responsibility is theft. Moving forward, Chen Investments will honor its founding principles, I continued. We'll maintain our financial strength. James will ensure that, while implementing new standards for community investment, environmental sustainability, and ethical development, I outlined our new initiatives: affordable housing requirements in all new developments, green building standards, a substantial community reinvestment fund. As I spoke, I watched the room divide, some nodding in approval, others shifting uncomfortably. Some will call these changes impractical or idealistic, I acknowledged, but balancing profit with purpose isn't just morally right, it's good business. The markets and communities of tomorrow will demand it. When I returned to my seat, James leaned over. Ambitious plan. The board won't approve half of it. They will when they see the projections, I countered. And when they understand the alternative is me selling my shares to the Westbrook Community Trust once my year as chairman is complete. James's eyebrows shot up. You give up control of the company? If necessary, but I'd rather transform it. I met his gaze directly. With your help, you understand this business better than anyone. Together, we could build something extraordinary, something that honors both Dad's business acumen and grandmother's principles. For a moment, James was silent, calculating. Finally, he asked, "Why would I help you change everything I've worked for?" "Because deep down, Dad wasn't happy," I said quietly. All his wealth, all his power, it didn't bring him joy. It cost him his relationship with me, with Mom in many ways, and ultimately with you too. Do you want to continue that legacy? Before James could answer, our mother joined us, resplendent in midnight blue. Your speeches were interesting, she observed. Both of you. Your father would have been surprised. A smile touched her lips. But your grandmother would have been proud. Later that evening, as the gala wound down, I found myself on the hotel's terrace, contemplating the city lights. The wooden box sat on the balustrade before me, empty now, its secrets revealed, its purpose fulfilled. Quite a homecoming, Victor said, joining me. William would be pleased. Confused initially, but ultimately pleased. I'm not sure about that, I smiled ruefully. I'm dismantling half of what he built. No, Victor corrected. You're fulfilling what he started but lost sight of. The company, yes, but more importantly, the family. He gestured inside, where James was deep in conversation with the head of the Westbrook Community Housing Alliance, an organization Chen Investments had previously opposed. Your brother is adaptable, pragmatic, he sees which way the wind is blowing. And which way is that? I asked. Victor's gaze was thoughtful, toward reconciliation, between profit and purpose, between brothers, between past and future. I considered his words, thinking about the complexity of family legacies, how they constrain us, shape us, and sometimes, if we're fortunate, free us to build something better. Inside my jacket pocket, my fingers found the brass key from my father's box. Unlike the documents and letter, I kept this one item, a tangible reminder of unexpected inheritances and second chances. I never wanted to run a company, I admitted to Victor. No, he agreed. You wanted to make a difference. Now you can do both. As we returned inside, James approached, his expression guarded but no longer hostile. The community housing people have some interesting proposals, he said. Financially unorthodox, but potentially workable. I'd need to restructure some financing models. Would you want to lead that initiative? I asked. A flicker of surprise crossed his face, followed by consideration. It would require significant changes to our development approach. Changes that might make grandmother proud, I suggested. James studied me for a moment, then nodded slightly. I'll have proposals on your desk Monday morning, Chairman. He extended his hand, and as I shook it, I felt something shift between us. Not forgiveness exactly, not yet, but possibility. A foundation upon which something new might be built. Later that night, as I stood in my father's study, my study now, at least for a year, I placed the empty wooden box on the shelf. Its purpose complete, its secrets revealed. The company would change. The brothers might reconcile. The true legacy of Chen Investments would finally emerge from the shadows. My phone buzzed with a text from my agent, National Geographic, interested in your corporate transformation series. When can you start shooting? I smiled, thinking about the perfect first image. Two brothers, one in a tailored suit, one with a camera, standing before their grandmother's first small office building. the forgotten foundation of their family empire. Neither disappointment nor perfect heir. Just two Chen men finally understanding that legacies aren't just inherited, they are transformed.